Hello, you are entering into Dawn in the Darkness. I am your host, Richard Earl Hams III. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to get back into a novel, a brilliant form of literature that gives a profound view on history of this country, the history of the Reformation, and how it impacted both you and I today. For many things ripple in the well of time and reverberate and show themselves consistent based off of many traumas and unfortunately a profound amount of inconsistencies when held up to the consistency of human nature. A lot of things were done in the Reformation correctly, and a lot of things were done incorrectly. And we're going to look into all of it and really dive into how we got to the state that we're in today as an American and as a so-called Black American in particular, and white Americans. We're all Americans, okay? First and foremost, we are all Americans. We all have ancestry that have fought for this country. If you are a whether you go back 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, doesn't really matter. So let's get into it. All right, share my screen. All right, we're getting into Following the Color Line by Ray Standard Baker. Now, Ray Standard Baker was a outstanding researcher. He did a lot of firsthand, up close, up front, in your face research on where we were as a country during the Reformation period. About 40 years after slavery, he does a lot of research on how the Negro is adapting to society, as well as how the white man, quote unquote white man, is adapting to the Negro and his freedom, how they're adjusting, how they're both adjusting. A new social order had just been, one old social order had been torn down forcibly via the Civil War. It wasn't naturally, it was forcibly taken down, and a new institution in the South had to be established. But there are a lot of things that were hindering the establishment or giving a lot of kickback. Naturally, when you forcibly tear something down, you're going to get a lot of kickback. When you can't change people's hearts by force just because you win a war. It doesn't mean you change the contents or the direction of their heart or their ideology. White supremacy was still a real thing, and it's something that both the blacks and the whites understood at that time. But we're going to get into the nitty gritty on the successes and the failures and where they came into play. Join me as I listen to, we're going over the Atlanta riot in Brownsville. Shout out to Atlanta for all those who are doing big things in Atlanta and not a part of the ratchetosity of the culture, and really trying to represent the American dream and what America is supposed to be. Shout out to y'all. But we're going to get into the Atlanta Brownsville riot and really explain how that riot began, the uniqueness of it, who was affected, who was the villain, who was to blame. We're gonna get into it, y'all. All right, let's do this.
One of the ablest of his race, telling me of how a friend of his, who by merest chance had provoked a number of half-drunken white men, had been set upon and frighteningly beaten, remarked, "It might have been me." Now I am telling these things just as they look to the Negro. It is quite as important as a problem in human nature to know how the Negro feels and what he says, as it is to know how the white man feels. How the newspapers fomented the riot. On the afternoon of the riot, the newspapers in flaming headlines chronicled 4 assaults by Negroes on white women. I had a personal investigation made of each of those cases. 2 of them may have been attempts at assaults, but 2 palpably were nothing more than fright the part of both the white woman and the Negro.
My bad, my baby was crying. Had to put the pacifier back in the mouth. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. All right, but we're getting back into it. So the it starts off by giving an example of how the Atlanta Brownsville riot begins. It starts with the newspapers. Do you hear fake news in there? Fake news. It's fake news. Fake news. It's all fake. News has always been a channel for stirring up the soul in a way that's not organic. Like normally, people get into confrontations in real life, and it affects their emotions in real life, and they understand where it began and where it started, and they have a clear picture on how it's going to end. Hopefully, it ends in a non-violent manner, but sometimes it does. But news is a category in which things are introduced to people and they have no validation on the direct facility. It's a trust organization. You got to trust the news and that they're not being manipulative or telling half the story or giving as much detail as duly responsible in accordance for the information that is actually out there and available. Now, there were four white women who were quote unquote assaulted according to the news. But Ray Standard Baker is saying that only two of those cases were actually valid or even could have been valid. And the other two were just a realm of fright on behalf of the white woman and the colored man. They weren't legitimate cases. But the newspaper doesn't care. The newspaper is having these newsboys. You know, back then they didn't have Twitter, they didn't have Facebook. They had legitimate newsboys, and they used to go out and they read all about it, read all about it. You know, you've seen that. You know, Hey Arnold kind of thing. But that's what they used to have. And they had a newsboy saying, well, one white woman assaulted, and the next hour, another white woman assaulted, and then another hour, another white woman assaulted, and then another hour, another white woman assaulted. This is consecutive. And Ray Standard Baker, he's going to go into how this is critical to the people who that are receiving the news because it isn't just the average Joe trying to feed his family, trying to be a contributor to society who's receiving the news. It's the lower strata of society who is often emotionally unstable and looking for a reason to do something. So let's get back into it.
As an instance, in one case, an elderly woman, Mrs. Martha Holcomb, going to close her blinds in the evening, saw a Negro on the sidewalk. In a terrible fright, she screamed. The news was telephoned to the police station, but before the officials could respond, Mrs. Holcomb telephoned them not to come out. And yet, this was one of the assaults chronicled in letters. 5 inches.
So that shows you right there that it wasn't a particular malice that this complaint was thrown out. The woman was afraid for one reason or another, startled, maybe she, it looked bad, and maybe the details aren't given. But the fact of the matter is, she called into to the police office, said, "Don't come out. It's nothing." It wasn't that she was after some white some black boy, trying to make an example out of him. She was legitimately scared, and this is a natural reaction. Like, my wife in particularly, she has trauma based off of black men. Right? It's not. I mean, she's married to a black man. She obviously she's my wife. She's my love and joy, but she has a lot of trauma, and she doesn't like going to certain places that may be dark, confined, or whatever, with black men that she doesn't know, based off the trauma. And this white woman, most likely, in some way, shape, or form, whether firsthand or secondhand, has some form of trauma, and it was a trauma-based response. But she corrected it, and she realized the error of her ways, and she sent the information in. But at that point, it was too late. The news had already gotten source of it, and was going to exploit it for their own profit and gain. And this is the problem. So let's get back into it.
Is high in a newspaper extra. And finally, on this hot Saturday half holiday, when the country people had come in by hundreds, when everyone was out of doors, when the streets were crowded, when the saloons had been filled since early morning with white men and Negroes, both drinking, certain newspapers in Atlanta began to print extras with big headings announcing new assaults on white women by Negroes. The Atlanta News published 5 such extras, and newsboys cried them through the city. Third assault, fourth assault, the whole city.
Those are those newsboys crying out the news of the day, and the news of the day at that time and period, it just happens to be assault on white women. And this is when the saloons were filled, the city was crowded. It was the perfect temperature for a riot. All the ingredients were there.
City, already deeply agitated, was thrown into a veritable state of panic. The news in the extras was taken as truthful, for the city was not in a mood then for a cool investigation. Calls began to come in from every direction for police protection. A loafing Negro in a backyard, who in ordinary times would not have been noticed, became an object of real terror. The police force, too small at best, was thus distracted and separated. In Atlanta, the proportion of men who go armed continually is very large. The pawnshops of Decatur and Peters streets, with windows like arsenals, furnish the low class of Negroes and whites with cheap revolvers and knives. Every possible element was here, then, for a murderous outbreak. The good citizens, white and black, were far away in their homes. The bad men had been drinking in the dives permitted to exist by the respectable people of Atlanta, and here they were gathered by night in the heart of the city. The
So all the respectable people were in bed. All the respectable, well, because they had work in the morning, okay? They had productive things to do. And this is the difference between those who are responsible and those who are irresponsible in the realm of citizenship. The good citizens aren't even in the place to riot. They're at home taking care of their families. But the irresponsible drunkards, gamblers, all those people were out and about like they usually are, and they weren't afraid to get into some business. Okay, they into some shady business. This is a fact, and it doesn't matter if they were both white and black, and they were actually communing in the same types of places at that time, as far as there were any restrictions, especially in that lower strata. And this is where the fire starts to come into place, because once you get alcohol involved, it's very easy to get people on the other side of a bad decision that wouldn't normally under circumstances be there. Let's get back into it.
mob gathers. And finally, a trivial incident fired the tinder. Fear and vengeance generated it. It was marked at first by a sort of rough, half-drunken horseplay, but when once blood was shed, the brute, which is none too well controlled in the best city, came out and gorged itself. Once permit the shackles of law and order to be cast off, and men, white or black, Christian or pagan, revert to primordial savagery. There is no such thing as an orderly mob.
There is no such thing as an orderly mob. Once the mob mentality gets put into place, it doesn't matter who the race, who the people are, it's going to lead to a lot of damage and a lot of violence. No matter how the mob started, no matter if it started with good intentions, whether it was just, whether right, by the end, at the end of the results of that mob, something bad is going to happen. People are going to be hurt, property will be destroyed because that's the nature, the very nature of a mob. People ask why the whole Black Lives Matter thing, why were they rioting? It probably didn't start off as that, destroying their own community, but inevitably when you get people in a small location, a lot of people in a small location who are in a mindset of being upset or in a capacity in which some of them may not even know exactly why they're there, but just the fact that you are there um makes you subject to a mob mentality. When people start to buck, and when you're in the mob, you just start to buck with them. You have little control. You are now part of the unit of whatever the purpose or whatever the energy of this mob is, or wherever it's reserved to, um, whatever the objective is, and it's usually destruction, chaos, mayhem, things like that. You are now subject to it, whether you like it or not, whether that was your intent or not. So be very careful what kind of protests you get yourself involved in, because it might get out of control very, very quickly depending on the energy and the leadership of that protest.
Crime had been committed by Negroes, but this mob made no attempt to find the criminals. It expressed its blind, unreasoning, uncontrolled race hatred by attacking every man, woman, or boy it saw who had a black face. A lame
They weren't looking for the criminals. They were looking for an outlet of their anger and unjust based off the news articles that had just presented themselves. Now, like I said, two of those instances of white women being assaulted might have been valid. It might have been, but two were clearly outlandish and they weren't legitimate. They were not legitimate sources of information. They they were clearly not in the realm of uh, validity. But the mob don't care. The mob don't care. The mob gonna be steady mobbing. Period. And they were looking for any black person to beat, chastise, teach a lesson. That's the nature of the mob. Find the nearest victim, and this goes without saying that any race and any group of people is capable of such things, especially the lower strata of a race or a people who are already unproductive with their hands or their resources, got nothing to lose, especially young folks.
bootblack, an inoffensive, industrious Negro boy, at that moment actually at work shining a man's shoes, was dragged out and cuffed, kicked, and beaten to death in the street. Another young Negro was chased and stabbed to death with jackknives in the most unspeakably horrible manner. The mob entered barber shops where respectable Negro men were at work shaving white customers, pulled them away from their chairs, and beat them. Cars were stopped, and inoffensive Negroes were thrown through the windows or dragged out and beaten. They did not stop with killing and maiming. They broke into hardware stores and armed themselves. They demolished not only Negro barber shops and restaurants, but they robbed stores kept by white men. Of course, the
They said they not only beat and robbed Negro establishments, but white establishment. Oh, it wasn't a color thing. The color thing was the excuse for bad behavior. that is in every man. You'll use any excuse in order to get something for free and to feel like you got the power. These white men who were in this mob at the time, they are no different than you or me or anyone else in our society. Those who are unproductive with their hands, those who do not have the capacity to be a legitimate force in their society naturally will look for extreme circumstances to wield some form of power over others, whether that be their fellow white neighbors who are doing well and being productive, or blacks who just might be in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not about race. It's about the wielding of power and the outlet of anger that make people feel vindicated or justified.
The mayor came out, and the police force and the fire department. And finally, the governor ordered out the militia to apply that pound of cure, which should have been an ounce of prevention. It is highly significant of Southern conditions, which the North does not understand, that the first instinct of thousands of Negroes in Atlanta, when the riot broke out, was not to run away from the white people, but to run to them. The white man who takes the most radical position in opposition of the Negro race will often be found loaning money to individual Negroes, feeding them and their families from his kitchen, or defending his Negroes in court or elsewhere. All of the more prominent white citizens of
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? When it went down, when things went down, when the riot started, the black people at that time, they didn't run away from the white people. They found their white people, right? These are our white people. And when you say ours, it's not a fact that they own them, it's that they are in good relations with them. They know them personally. So they went to them in mass saying, hey, these unruly, mobbish, barbaric white people are after our blood. What should we do? Help us. Do like what can we do in this situation? And the whites that were in good relations with them gave them sound advice. Let's see.
Atlanta during the riot protected and fed many colored families who ran to them in their terror. Even Hoke Smith, governor-elect of Georgia, who was more distrusted by the Negroes as a race, probably than any other white man in Georgia, protected many Negroes in his house during the disturbance. In many cases, white friends armed Negroes and told them to protect themselves. One widow I know of, who had a single black servant, placed a shotgun in his hands and told him to fire on any mob that tried to get him.
That woman said, shoot first, Jim. Shoot first. Keep yourself alive. I don't care if they white. Man, I don't care. If they come after you, shoot them. That's what that white woman said to her black servant. She didn't care nothing about the white or the black. This was her main guy. For whatever reason, she had a favoring toward him. Maybe he was outstanding at his job or whatever. Maybe she had a genuine, a close, loving relationship. It doesn't go into detail, but she wasn't about to see her main guy, her single black servant, harmed in any way. So she said, shoot that white, shoot him down, Bill," and respect to her.
She trusted him absolutely. Southern people possess a real liking, wholly unknown in the North, for individual Negroes whom they know. So much for Saturday night. Sunday was quiescent but nervous, the atmosphere full of the electricity of apprehension. Monday night, after a day of alarm and of prowling crowds of men, which might at any moment develop into mobs, the riot broke forth again in a suburb of Atlanta called Brownsville. Story of the mob's work in a southern Negro town. When I went out to Brownsville, knowing of its bloody part in the riot, I expected to find a typical Negro slum. I looked for squalor, ignorance, vice, and I was surprised to find a large settlement of Negroes, practically every one of whom owned his own home, some of the houses being as attractive without and as well furnished within as the ordinary homes of middle-class white people. Near at hand, surrounded by beautiful ground,
Don't get mad at this man for being surprised, okay? If we saw the same thing today, we would be surprised. All right. We would be like, whenever we think of a black neighborhood, we're not thinking about that. All right. We're thinking about vice, slums, the ghetto, hood. And it's not because of a disenfranchisement necessarily. It's because the race is new. Okay. And there was a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that are happening in the cities that are still happening to this very day. An attitude and an ill preparedness to handle city life via the vices that we have, the vexes that on our nature via alcohol, drinking, gambling, the lower strata of life takes hold of the black community in a way that it doesn't other communities. This is just a reality. We gotta stop the cap. Be honest with yourself. Whenever you go to a black community, whenever you go to a black party, you're gonna have a degree of gambling, of of alcoholism that necessarily isn't there in other certain stratas of society. That's not a bad thing per se when it has its place. It's unavoidable. I mean, vices and stuff like that, they are bad, but they're unavoidable. But when it comes to degrees and separation, the upper class, the upper echelons of quote unquote black people or people who refer to themselves as black have to be recognized that if you're a lower strata black person, you should not be in too much communing with them because they're gonna get you into trouble. They're gonna get you into the lower realms of violence and alcoholism. But black people, we have stopped categorizing ourselves as upper or lower or middle class. We all view ourselves as black, blackly black. We all black. We all got the same. We don't got the same struggles. I did not have the same struggles growing up. I had struggles based off a upper middle class, suburban young man, and I had a bright future, and I have a bright future, and I took advantage of that future. But the problem is that all of us are built to think monolithically about the issues that confront us every single day. White supremacy is not my problem. It's not my problem. I am an entrepreneur. I run my own business. My father is an entrepreneur, runs his own business. We run things around here by the grace of God. We run things. And so nothing, no door can be shut to me that God, both God and my own abilities can maneuver and make a way to sustain myself and my family. White man ain't got no say in that. No man, the Asian man got no say in that. Nobody has a say in my opportunities, especially in this beautiful country that we live in today. But we're gonna stop it there though. We're gonna stop it there. All right. If we're gonna go deeper into the Brownsville riot, join me next time. My name is Richard Earl Hammonds III, and you are entering or exiting. Sorry, you are exiting dawn in the darkness. I pray that the Lord allows your darkness to be as noonday, and let me get the scripture. I always missed the outro. Hold up. Let your light dawn in the darkness, and let your darkness be as noonday. Yeah, bless one, y'all.
were two Negro